Good morning, everybody, and welcome to all of you. I think you all know me now, but I'll keep saying I'm Tia Kolayani, founder and chair of WIHTL. I am here with Richard Nugent from 21 Leadership and Gina Bailey from the WIHTL team. Welcome to our sixth and last webinar in our series, the Furloughed Leader, with Richard. Just a few words from me before we get started. The whole thing, I was just reflecting on it. It's always a good time to reflect after, 6 weeks of doing this series. And this all started with a LinkedIn post and a conversation between Richard and myself 6 weeks ago. And we decided to embark on a journey, and both of us were determined to support leaders across hospitality, travel and leisure who had been either furloughed themselves or were managing teams of people who had been furloughed. There have been lots of what I call little gems over the last 6 weeks. We started with a series of 3, then we decided to increase to 6 in total, and like all good things, at one point they have to come to an end. And but it doesn't mean that we are we're sad. We are very excited about today's session, and we're joined today by many leaders from McDonald's, lounges and motor hospitality, Pizza Hut, Whitbread, Green King, Odeon, Hilton, and a few more organizations. Today we will be focusing on maintaining change momentum, and let me hand over to Richard, who will take us through today's session. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Tia. Yeah, session 6. I think when I do this kind of thing, often I'll be saying, God, hasn't time flown? And for some of you, I know, who've been opening restaurants and things, time might have gone past in a blur, but actually 6 weeks, or probably 9 weeks since we started the conversation, it does seem like a lifetime ago. But actually, I think it's something for us to bear in mind as we enter into what hopefully is going to be a new phase for the sector, is that these last 9 weeks, 6 weeks, those of you who've joined us on all these sessions, it probably seems like the longest 6 weeks ever. But what it does show is how much things can change in that period of time. And I'm a real optimist. I think there's really good reasons for that. And let's, another 6 weeks, the world can be an even more positive, even better place to be. So I'm really delighted to bring these sessions to the end. What it does mean is it's the last opportunity, at least in this setting, for you to ask any questions, ask me about anything to do with leadership, about change, about culture, about learning, about people, about me and how we do things, why we do things the way we do. And I've purposely designed the session so it's not quite as packed in. So I would like questions. If there aren't, we'll run short. So feel free to please do ask any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And actually, I purposefully put less of those little kind of just-in-time tools in, because I would rather they came out of the questions that you ask and the answers that I give. So we're really going to focus on 3 key chunks today. One is my single favorite change tool, which I've referred to several times over the course of this session. The second chunk, we're going to spend some time looking at values. And again, we mentioned values on the first session as a result of a question that I got from somebody in the group. And they've come up several times during the course of the series, but we haven't had a dedicated session on, why values are so important and how to make them work in an organization. So we're going to do that. And then the final key chunk is actually the overall framework that's underpinned what we've done during the course of the whole series. And I mentioned it briefly in the first session, and it's a great way to recap on what we've done during the course of the whole program, and hopefully to bring it all together, but also to give you a base on which to maintain change momentum. That's why I've called this session, that, because we're not going to get to the point where, you know, the pandemic disappears or COVID disappears, and that's going to be us in a kind of freeze situation for the next 2 years. Changes are going to keep on coming thick and fast, and probably thicker and faster than ever before. And there are certain things that if you pay attention to them in your team or in your business or in your organization, will make sure that you can continue to perform during change, to recover, reset, recalibrate after change, and then prepare for the next one. So this session in some ways is both an introduction to a little bit of new, but really pulling a load of threads together from all of the other sessions. In fact, there's a couple of times when I was designing this and running through it, I thought, have we already done that? And it's actually just because we've mentioned so many things, and this is an opportunity to pull it all together. Two other things before we get into it. The first is that pretty much my sole measure of success for something like this is how much you go and apply the things that we've done during the course of the sessions. So whether you've been on all of them, and for those of you who have, I've got a little offer for you at the end actually. But whether you've been on all of them, or, you know, I don't know if this is anyone's first, or if you've just been on one or two, make sure that you go back and you review your notes and you look at the things that you thought were really great or a good idea, and do something with them, apply them, teach them to somebody else, use them, experiment with them. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to me is somebody goes, that was really brilliant, that was really useful, I really like that. And then I bump into them again in 3 or 6, 12 months time, and they go, oh, there was that thing you covered. Oh yeah, I didn't apply it. Go in, try things, because everything's been not just well researched, but also well tested. Final thing is to say, I've got an offer for those people who've been through all of the sessions, but also I've got a couple of requests for the rest of you. I'll make that at the end as well. So the first thing we're going to spend time on is my single favorite change tool. And there's 3 reasons why I've decided to spend time on it during the course of this session. So the first is, many of you are facing real life challenges and problems that you need different solutions to, you need more ideas to. You know, I'm guessing some of you have been doing some tremendous planning over the last month or so about getting people into your hotels or your pubs or your restaurants safely with a 2-meter rule in place. And hopefully by about 12:45, you've got a new challenge, which is what's that look like with a 1-meter rule or 1 meter plus. You'll all have different challenges. So this change tool, you'll be able to apply it immediately to get some different ideas to overcome the challenges. You'll also notice when we do the final part of the session that in this change momentum framework, actually the change capability piece is the one we spent less time on during the course of this series. So it's important that we do something on it. And then finally, you'll see during it, those of you who've been through a lot of the sessions, even within this particular framework we're going to start with, there are several elements of it that I've used in different sessions already. So it becomes a little recap in itself. And I did refer to the book earlier in the series. The book's called The Solutions Focus, and I highly recommend it. Solutions Focus is both a model in itself that you can break down and use in its entirety or in separate bits, but it's also a whole philosophy. I genuinely don't know how I used to coach before I knew about Solutions Focus. I don't know how I used to problem solve. I don't really know how we build effective strategies, because a lot of writing on strategy talks about focusing on problem. I was trying to think of an example of where we've used this in our business to tackle what was a real challenge for us. Probably the most stark example came up around about this time, just 2 years ago. It was probably a little bit later, maybe August time, 2 years ago. We were set a challenge by a client, which was, we were doing a piece of work, which was actually about rolling out a new loyalty card system and how you interact with customers and guests and visitors around that. It wasn't our usual kind of piece of work, actually. But the upshot of it was, we had to train 40,000 people in 7 countries in 3 months, and there was a team of 4 of us working on the project. And that's true, 40,000 people, 7 countries, 3 months, 4 people working on the project. And it's the kind of thing where if I didn't have this kind of philosophy, we would have just gone, it's impossible. And actually we did it. And the insights we got was from this particular model. So it's really well worth it. And the whole philosophy of it is that the same thinking that creates a problem can't be used to solve it. And the more we focus on problems, especially when they have a people element of it, the more they fill up our mental framework. So what probably the most credible piece of research that I've seen is we can pay attention to about 20 things at any one time. And when we're problem solving and something is, in our face and we've got to do something about it, we often get into this habit of filling up those 20 things that we can pay attention to with all of the elements of the problem, which it almost neurologically doesn't leave us any room to come up with the solutions. So by changing the focus on what the solutions are, we can get a different set of ideas and resources. So as I'm going through the framework, be thinking about what is the problem that you're faced with now, or the challenge or the opportunity that you're faced with now, that you could make a big difference to by using this model immediately. And as we get to the end of it, I'm going to ask you what those are, and we may even do a little bit of live coaching with it. Here we go. So this is the framework. In solutions focus, you start with the platform down at the bottom. The platform is the closest that you come to talking about the problem. And I've been in rooms where you've got some eminent professors who are effectively problem analysts, and the guys who wrote the book on solutions focus arguing about whether you ever need to do problem analysis or not. I'm not saying never do problem analysis. I think there's a place for it. But certainly when it comes to people issues, having this in the mix is really, really valuable. So the platform is a description of where you are now, no better, no worse. So in the example I gave earlier on, what I described was the platform. We've got to train 40,000 people in 7 countries. We've got 3 months to do it, and we're a team of 4. That's it. There's no judgment attached to it. It's just where we are. For some of you, as I say, your challenge might be, we have everything in place, ready to open with 2 meter rules. And today we could see that reduced to 1 meter, and we've got whatever it is, 10 days or so to turn that around. That's just a statement of where we are now, no better, no worse. Another platform we created right at the beginning of this, the pandemic outbreak and everything, was that 70% of our clients are from your industry. And at that stage, we were saying, we've got no idea when that industry will be ready to do the kind of work we do. And, and we've got a business to run. That's a statement of platform. So the first thing you do is just create a clear statement of where we are now, no better and no worse. You then, on the back of this, create what in solutions focus is called the future perfect. And we talked about this and looked at this when we were exploring vision. It was one of the ways that I said you could create a vision. In solutions focus, there's even this lovely question that can be raised, which is, if you went to bed tonight and while you were asleep overnight, a miracle happened, and your platform is now exactly as you'd want it to be, what are all of the ways that you would know? So if you went to bed tonight while you were asleep overnight, a miracle happened, and the platform was now exactly how you'd want it to be, what are all of the ways that you know? And how rich you create that future perfect really decides on the scale of the challenge. And sometimes I'll be doing this live with someone. So I was working with a new football client on Monday, who's basically feeling a bit down in the dumps. He's not been in his team. If things pick up, he's got the potential of a really big move abroad, whereas at the moment he's not even in his team. So it's like, okay, so you went to bed tonight and everything's exactly as you wanted to be. What are all the ways you would know? And he gave me 3 or 4 things. If this is about reshaping a business, it might be much bigger. When we did it for our challenge, our challenge about training all those people, is just, we would have, future perfect would be, all of the people would be trained We wouldn't have done it all ourselves, and it would have been done within the time, like in less than 3 months. And even that started to give us a little bit of an idea of some of the things that we could do differently to help solve the challenge. This idea of we didn't have to do it all ourselves became really clear, the approach we were going to have to take. So you've created your platform, you've created your Future Perfect. You then do some scaling. And again, I've used this often during the course of these series. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the Future Perfect, where are you now? And this is where I think the philosophy of solutions focus starts to really come into its own, because you start to think, this is the beginning of starting to think differently about things. Quite often people will come to me and say, oh, we're only at a 3 out of 10. And I'm able to say, okay, so you've created a Future Perfect. It's like exactly how you'd want it to be, almost impossible, Future Perfect, but you're saying you're already a third of the way there. So in some ways, it's the number isn't what's most important, it's what comes next. But it's worth thinking about it. Again, those of you, I'll just use the 1 meter thing again as an example. Those of you who have that kind of challenge, if you were to think of what the Future Perfect is, and you were to scale it on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you now? Because what you start to uncover is some of the resources that you already have available. Because what you ask next is what has got you that high up the scale. No matter how high or low the number is, you start to ask the question, what's got you that high up the scale? And again, like I've had people come back to me and say, I'm a 1. And my response to that is, great. What's made you a 1 rather than a 0? The official way of looking at it, I guess, if you were to read the book, is you're starting to uncover examples of when the Future Perfect exists already, even if it's in tiny, tiny situations. So for us, one of the things we uncovered in that big project we're talking about was actually, we had a number of train the trainer sessions, for want of a better phrase, already designed. There was another extra twist in the project that I haven't mentioned, which was the system that had been created to the system that the new loyalty card was based on wasn't working. So we were going to train all these people in the system we were training them on, or that it sat around, we knew it wasn't going to work. So we'd done a whole load of train the trainers for each other within our team to help us to get over that milestone, even though it was a huge stumbling block potentially. So we actually said, we've already got a whole range of sessions already created. There are certain things that we can tweak in order to be able to use them to other people to create a whole load of train the trainer sessions. And that was at the hub of our solution. So what's got you up that high of a scale? What already exists that would help you to move on? And then when you've created that, the next question is, what would have to happen to move you just one small step up the scale? One of the things that I see happen and change regularly is people create big visions, which, as you know, I'm a big fan of, or they create, BHAGs, big audacious goals, big hairy audacious goals. Is that right? And they're great, but people stand back and go, how on earth are we possibly ever going to achieve that? And everybody goes into a form of paralysis and things don't really progress. Whereas if all you're looking to do is find out what would have to happen just to move you from a 2 to a 3, and do that, what you're creating is small actions. And what I find consistently is that it's once you uncover the thing that'll move you from a 2 to a 3, it's probably those things that would move you. The thing that would move you from a 2 to a 3 will move you from a 2 to a 4, 5, or 6. Small steps often make the big difference. And then once you've done those, you can stop and reset the process and start all over again. And the beauty is, that's the whole framework. That is, I think if you do buy the book, that's on either page 14 or 21. I can't remember off the top of my head. And everything else is examples around it. Platform, Future Perfect, scaling against the Future Perfect, What's got you that high? What's going to move you one small step up the scale? It's purposely simple, and there's an acronym that's used in the book about why it's so simple, but it can make a huge change. Let me share one other example with you, and then I'm going to come out and ask you for any questions or any thoughts or ideas that you might, of when you might use this. In the, I think it was early 90s, there was a big car manufacturer, Central European car manufacturer, and their platform was they had to get people on the front line, mainly men, on the front line to wear their safety goggles. And they couldn't. And they'd done all sorts. It was in their induction, it was in their health and safety policy, but people just wouldn't always do it. So they started to apply this approach. And as they created the Future Perfect, what the question that they then asked was, how could we get people, what would have to happen to get people to wear their safety goggles even when they didn't have to? That was the Future Perfect. Now I choose this on purpose because I think it might have some relevance to things that are going on today. But what would have to happen for people to wear their safety goggles even when they didn't have to? And it changed the course of their thinking altogether, because what they thought about was, is there ever a time when people wear things over their eyes when they don't need to? And they thought about, bear in mind when this was, early 90s, like guys going into discos where it's a bit dark but still wearing their designer shades. So they're like, oh, how do we use that and test that to see if something like that would help? So this part of the story's got a little bit of artistic license because I can't quite remember the brands, but it was essentially something like, if you were an apprentice, you got your Primark safety goggles. And then once you graduated, you got your Topshop ones, and then you got your Next ones, and then you moved up your Armani ones and your Gucci ones and your Versace ones and so on. So actually they became a little bit of a status symbol. And if you were the only one on a team working together who only had Next or the equivalent safety goggles, you got a bit of pressure to perform even better to get upgraded. But also because they were a status symbol, people would wander out of the factory floor and into the restaurant with their safety goggles still accidentally on, especially if they'd just been upgraded. So just by a change in the question and a focus on the solution rather than the problem, they solved their challenge pretty much. So that's solutions focus in a nutshell. So 2 questions for you. Two questions. One is, if you've got a question, what is it? Type it in and ask me now. Or the second is, have you got a situation where you could use this live and experiment with it? And if so, type that in. What is it? Okay, Matt has asked a great question. How can you create a future perfect if the decisions are made by others? Okay, that is a brilliant question, Matt. And this is why I say that this is both a model that you need to follow diligently, but it's also a philosophy thing. So the idea of creating a future perfect rather than a smart goal is that it changes the psychology that you look at that future perfect through, the lenses that you see it through. So the idea is not to achieve the future perfect. So the fact that, for example, you're having some things imposed on you in your industry because of the situation, that shouldn't preclude you from creating a future perfect that doesn't quite line up with that. Like if I was working with a team live now and we created a future perfect on social distancing, I would expect one of the things to come up in there is like, if I woke up tomorrow and a miracle happened, COVID would be gone. We wouldn't have to, we wouldn't have to be socially distant at all. Now that isn't going to happen, but it still might be worth exploring. What would we have to do to perform brilliantly if that did happen tomorrow? Because it just uncorks different ideas. One of the other ideas I had when I was planning for this was, if it was my pub or restaurant or hotel, I would be, one of my future perfects would be, people would come to us because of our social distancing. So, so if everyone else is reducing down and saying it only has to be a metre plus, one of the things I might work on, just in the interest of creating different solutions to what we're grappling with, is actually people to come to us because we maintain 2 metres. People come to us because of our safety. Now, if that was our future perfect, where are we now? Scaling. And what would have to happen to move us 1 or 2 steps up the scale? It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily solve the problem, but allows us to come up with different things and be slightly creative in slightly different way, just come up with different solutions. I hope that makes sense.
Richard, I think that Lana Roberts has come up with a fabulous example in the chat. Brilliant.
We have 200 reviews of franchisee financials to do within 6, 7, and 4 weeks. The team's struggling as they just say it's too much work or spend too much time. Yeah, it does sound like too much work. Let me just check my timings here. Okay, I'm gonna take a small risk. Tia, Joanna, is it possible for Lana to unmute or not?
Yes.
Lana, if you are able to, could you, and you're up for it, could you unmute? And if you're not up for it, oh, here we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Lana, thank you. We probably got about 2.5 minutes on this, right? So I'm not promising we're going to solve it, but it's such a good challenge. I can't resist. So that's a big challenge. I can feel it.
Yes.
You went to bed tonight, and while you were asleep overnight, a miracle happened, and that situation was exactly as you'd want it to be. How would you know?
So we would have reviewed all franchisee financials, done a full comprehensive group review by the end of July.
By the end of July. Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's your future perfect, and it sounds really stretching to me without knowing the ins and outs of it, but if that's your future perfect, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you now?
Probably a 4, actually.
Okay. So again, this is a little bit for you, but also a little bit of a learning point for everyone, if this is okay. I already want you to notice that you're 40% of the way towards a huge challenge. You're not at a starting point, so there are already a whole load of things going on that you've done brilliantly to make this work.
Yeah, I think that's the bit that I picked up initially, is that it feels like it's a huge task, but actually the team have done a really good job to get to the place that we're already at the moment. So it's just changing the mindset, I think, and the language.
Yeah. And how long has it taken, like from ground zero to that 4, how long's that taken, just out of interest?
Probably a couple of months, but I think that's more having clarity on what we wanted the solution to be and the perfect to be. So I think it maybe would have been quicker if we knew where we wanted to get to.
Great. And it might be worth reflecting on, without giving you more work to do, like how many days did that take? And then like fast forward in that, you know, of the actual work to do, you might find that for all it's a real challenge that you've done, you know, you've got 40% of the way there, not far off in the time that you've got.
Yeah, and I get that's from the beginning where you said as well, focusing on the solution rather than the problem. I think we spend quite a lot of time talking about what the problem is and, you know, what are all the blockers to getting us to where we need to get to, rather than the other way around.
Great. And I think it was Joanna asked a question on the model, what were counters? Actually, counters are exactly what Lana's just described there. It's those examples where it's working already. And one final question for us, and Lana, you're at a 4 now. What would have to happen? Like, what would have to happen today just to move you from a 4 to a 5?
Just focusing on it 100% and almost moving everything else, postponing it and anything else that we've got going on, managing expectations in terms of workload, and just getting the team 100% focused on this task.
Okay. And is that the whole idea of pausing pretty much everything else? Is that possible? Is that politically, ecologically possible?
It is possible. It's just about getting the team in that mindset where they're used to just doing things and you know, being responsive to other departments and getting things done quickly, to suddenly say, actually, I can't do that for you this week, next week, because I'm focusing on this. Brilliant. So yeah, it is possible.
So my last bit of kind of advice on this is when you've done that, when you've gone out and made that communication saying all the other stuff's got to pause to your stakeholders, so you're now at a 5, go through the process again, future perfect, scaling, etc., because that'll give you your next, your 5 to a 6. But you probably find actually you're maybe at a 6 or a 7 already, but do the process again when you get there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
That's been useful. Perfect. And so I hope it's been okay to do that live, and I hope it's been useful to everyone. It really is that simple to use this model, and it can make that much of a difference. One last question on this, then I'm going to have to carry on. Parik's asked, how much does mindset play in the executing? So the best answer I think I can give to this is that it's all mindset. But the great thing with solutions focus is it's almost like bypassing the problem, bypassing our filters that say we can't do this. So I never ever, for example, I never position this as like a positive thinking model or framework, because all you're doing is saying instead of our focus being on the problem, our focus is on the solution. So it is all about mindset, but without people realizing it. And if I'm working with the most negative groups or the most challenging groups, that we work with, I always use this because of that. It allows that shift in mindset, but almost like covertly, if that makes sense. Brilliant. So that's solutions focus, my favorite change tool. And hopefully you can see, even with that little live coaching session, how valuable it can be, even with something really challenging like that. So we're going to spend some time hanging around with values. I mentioned them last week. I mentioned them in the first session. When I mentioned them last week, it raised 1 or 2 questions from people, because I said, if it's on your agenda to roll values out in your organization, there's some things to do and not to do. And actually spending this time on values is a perfect way to reconnect with some of the things we focused on already, like culture, the obvious one. How do you create high-performing teams? Even things like our own well-being, because one of the quickest ways to get unhappy is to earn money in a way that isn't aligned with our values, or to have a job in an organization whose values aren't aligned with ours. So having this time to reflect on our own values and to spend a little bit of time thinking about how to create organizational values and how to connect them, I think is a perfect time to pull things together. So again, I'm going to get you to do something before I share some ideas and some insights. So again, whether you want to write these down on a piece of paper and then type 1 or 2 in, or whether you want to type yours in live, is totally up to you. But in a moment, I'd like everyone to answer this question. What's most important to you, really? Now, I may have posed this question on an earlier session, but even if I did, I want you to do it anyway. What's most important to you, really? Now, this is not what's most important to you in work versus out of work. It's what's most important to you as a human. And if you say something like, my big red shiny sports car or my massive house, you're probably not thinking about it deeply enough. It tends not to be materialistic things. I'm not guiding you because they've got to be your own, but it tends to be things like honesty, freedom, health, family, those kinds of things. So whatever comes out of your pen or your fingers, if you're typing them straight in, I can see some coming in. If you've written them down, if you can just type 1 or 2 of them in. If we were doing this as a group and you were all in front of me in some way, I'd say you need somewhere between 4 and 8, tends to be the right kind of number. So yeah, what's most important to you, really? And again, if some people are typing in already, that's great. If we can have a few more, that would really help as well. So we've got happiness, integrity. We've got family, health and happiness. Thank you, Angela. They tie in really tightly with mine, actually. Integrity and compassion, authenticity. Mel says relationships, health from Debbie, personal satisfaction, happiness, family, achievement, balance, respect. Linda, they actually tie really closely in with our company values as well, organizational values. It's got lots of people saying happiness, integrity, family, making a difference, leadership, family, authenticity. Thank you. Feel free to keep typing as I'm saying this, but that's been really useful. So already from looking through those, I can see that there are some commonly shared values between us as a group. And that's like, it's really critical. So at an absolute minimum, what we now know is if we were a team working together, or even a cross-functional working group, we've got an idea that things like family, health, authenticity, happiness, are commonly shared values between us. And if we were going to work together for any period of time, we'd go through and work out what the top 3 or 4 is. Because at an absolute minimum, we are much more likely to forgive each other for our behavioral differences and foibles, if you like, if we know we've got shared values. So I think it's fair to say this, I haven't set this up, but I think if you were to do some kind of personality assessment between Tare and I, for example, I suspect it would be quite different on a lot of factors. We've got, we're quite different in lots of ways. But I suspect if we did a values match, we would have some key values that really closely map and overlap. So what that does for people like us who are potentially quite different and might work in different ways, we'll be much more forgiving of each other when we understand that the things that are most important to us as human beings are shared. So don't lose sight when we're about to go on to talk about organizational values and things, that when we talk about personal values, they are the things that are most important to us as human beings. And actually the quickest way to upset me is probably to tread on my values. So at a minimum, you get a more shared set of behaviors. Now, if we are the senior team together of our organization, what we have now is the foundations of what could become a set of organizational values. And there's 1 or 2 things I'm going to say about organizational values coming up that might be a little bit controversial. And I apologize if it sounds controversial, but I'm not sorry, because I think it's right. Organizational values, for them to have a chance of living and breathing and coming to life, they have to be either reflective of the most commonly shared values of the people who make up the organization, or at a minimum, they've got to be reflective of the most commonly shared values of the people who lead the organization. Now, I know that organizational values aren't on the remit of everyone who's on this, but at some point you will all have a conversation where you're questioning, challenging, or looking to understand organizational values, and why are they just stuck up on a wall and nobody does anything with them. For organizational values to come to life, they have to be reflective of the most commonly shared values of the people who lead the organization, because that's the only way those people, and if it's us, it's the only way we will live and breathe them. If they are reflective of our personal values, we wouldn't not live and breathe them, and therefore other people in the organization will see them being modeled. And one of the interesting things is going and creating a set of organizational values is one of the most challenging things we do, because boards and executive teams and senior teams all of a sudden turn into year 10 English teachers, and they really fight over the meaning of words. And it is really important that, we create a set of words that those people who are going to live and breathe them, sign off on. But the interesting thing with values is it's not about the words. So our organizational values are honesty, balance, and connection. They are reflective of the most commonly shared values of the people who make up our organization. But what's most important is the stories that we tell about what those values mean to us. So if Brian from my team was on this call, and actually Alistair as well, probably, if we talked about balance and what that looks like to us in the overlap between, being husbands and fathers versus being, consultants and coaches and people who work, Brian's story of what that looks like and my story of what that looks like are really very different. There's an essence that sits underneath it, but we can tell our story of what balance looks like to us. And it's those conversations that are much more important. So those of you who aren't shaping values, but want to help create a high-performing team, for example, the thing to do is get people talking about their values, and if you've got organizational values, however strong they are, how they link to them. There's a brilliant piece of research by Kouzes and Posner, who are the top 4 characteristics people, that shows that if in an organization you've got no organizational values, but you get people talking about their values and the sharedness of their values and telling stories about, for example, what family means to Rosalind versus what it means to me, because that would be on mine. Family would be top of mind. So is what Rosalind means the same as mine? If you have people having those conversations without any espoused company values, engagement will still go up. If you roll out a set of organizational values without any conversations about what integrity means to Liz versus what honesty means to me, and is that the same thing? If we don't do that and just roll the values out, it can have a negative impact on engagement. So doing values wrong in a company can have a negative impact on engagement. The sweet spot comes when you have a set of organizational values that are well crafted and they are linked to the stories that people tell about their own values, that they are connected. That's when you can get up to a 20% uplift in engagement. So again, if we know the stories behind them, that's when the sweet spot comes. So those people who've got values on an agenda because you're thinking about culture going forward and what culture looks like in the new world, I'm going to share with you 3 more things to make sure your values come to life. But for those of you who are just looking to strengthen your team, you're in the eye of the storm now and you need everyone to work together, have people talking about their values and what they mean and how they connect and all that. Let me share you 3 more things that are vital about values, and then again, I'll come out for any questions and answer any that are there already. So, for values to have a chance of living and breathing, as I said, they've got to be reflective of the most commonly shared values. But they also must be integrated in every policy, process, procedure, including performance management. I'll come to that in a moment. One of the interesting things is, if you don't look at what you do in light of your culture, which is how we want things to be around here, then values and culture is always going to be like a bolt-on to how we operate. So there's got to be a look at, is how we're actually doing the work that we're doing in line with our values? And if it's not, make the changes that you can. It's a particularly important in performance management. I still maintain that the biggest challenge for somebody managing people, so I'm not talking about leadership challenge, I'm talking about a management challenge. The most challenging thing for most managers is to manage people who are, I call them brilliant jerks, really experienced, really high performers. They might be really good salespeople that have all the knowledge, but they're culturally misaligned. And the best way to be able to manage those is to have your values as part of your performance management system in some way, shape, or form. And the last thing is, big bang launches when it comes to values, in fact, when it comes to cultural stuff, absolutely don't work. Don't do a big launch of values until they're already integrated in your organization. So, no matter what your view is on values, what your remit is on it, what I'd love is either what's your key reflection from that whole piece on values, or what's your key reflection, or what's your question from it?
I think, Richard, it's Joe. I think just a little reflection is, I have been in many companies and have gone through so many different types of personality profiles. Myers-Briggs, and how you work with your green hat, red hats and everything else, but haven't ever really done the values piece to such extent. So that's just my reflection. So I can tell you what kind of speed reading profile other people are, but never done that exercise with values, I have to say.
So yeah, it's a fun. We do it in almost every piece of work we do. Almost every piece of work that we do, because it's just fun. If we understand if you and I understand what's most important to us, we're different Myers-Briggs, or we use personality programs, or Brian does epigenetics, or any of the profile, we'll forgive each other, a lot more, and we'll align a lot more. Yeah, Mel's just asked how important is it to get people talking about their personal values. For me, it is. It's crucial. I can't tell you how many warring teams the bridge we've built to get them to start working together. It's not the only thing we do, but is to do this values piece. And there's a certain exercise we do with every single group we ever do it with, which if anyone wants to know, you can drop me a line and I'll share. It's really, really easy to facilitate. But you have to get people talking about the personal values. It's critical. I'll take this one from Matt. Our company just set new values and a vision all involved all levels, most importantly, the team that deliver. Using what you've just done. Yeah. Have regular conversations about values. So like really quickly, the reason I get so passionate about values is I used to work for Empower where my last proper job was, and there was a big launch done of a new set of values that came from corporate on high. And God, just the most traditional type of rollout. Don't ever do a rollout, but the most traditional type of rollout. And they had these boards, these values boards hanging from the false ceilings in the corridors. And I used to sit in with the HR team and watch people walking down the corridor through the glass. And about once a week, I'd go and stick my head out, and the values boards were hung on these wires that were just a little bit too long. And so sometimes people would like bang their heads on them as they walked down the corridors. And I'd pop out and when I'd watch this happen, say, can you tell me any of the values that were launched last month? And people would say, oh, there's that one about customer, but I can't remember the rest. And they literally just banged their heads on them. And I swore then I would never be part of that if I possibly could. So get people talking about the values, use them every day, integrate them into the conversations until they just become part of what people say around you. Excellent. I've got one question that's been hanging around in the Q&A from Gareth, which I'm going to answer before I go on to the last little piece. So, I hope this was meant for everyone, by the way, Gareth. Yeah, imagine like me, you prefer face-to-face training. What would you do to encourage face-to-face training again and to make employees feel safe in that learning environment? Gareth, I've got quite a strong view on that. So we've done a really intense piece of work over the last, however long it's been now, 14 weeks. Because what we didn't want to do was just go, oh, we can work online now. Because we believe as an organization that there's nothing that quite beats having a group of people live in a room. And we've got a specific design philosophy, and we don't want to lose that. But what we have done is we've worked on how we can recreate, if like that's platinum, how we can do what we do without being in the room. So how we can recreate gold. But for me, yeah, I do want to work back face to face with people, and I do think there'll be a point when we can. I think it's a time thing, Gareth. I think we've got to be patient until it comes to the point where we don't have to be socially distant anymore, and I think that time will come. But I just think we've got to be patient. What I do think, this is again potentially the slightly controversial thing, that we're going through a pneuma at the minute. Mark Ritson calls this a pneuma, where everyone's talking about people will always want to work remotely. People will not want to do face-to-face training anymore. Kids won't want to go back to school. People won't want to go and work in offices, all those kind of things. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think most people will want to go back and work in an office, and people want to go back and do face-to-face training. That's not to say there won't be a big place for this, that it won't be more prevalent, because I think it will. But I think the idea that those things are dead is just not true. So I think, how do we make people feel more comfortable? I think it's just time, in my opinion. So, last point, and this is where we draw everything together. So underpinning this whole program has been a piece of work that we started in late summer of last year. I mentioned this very briefly in the first workshop. That we were starting to do that. We'd done a research piece which was based on this idea that unknown and massively disruptive change was going to be the biggest challenge for leaders going forward. We didn't know what was around the corner. We were thinking about things like AI and the fact that organizations are growing and then contracting faster than ever before, and those kinds of things. so the whole purpose was, what does an organization need to have in place to build its change capability, its capability to perform during change, reset and recalibrate after change, and then prepare for the next change. That's the basis that all of the sessions we've done here have been built on. Like I say, I mentioned in the first one, I haven't kept going back to it, but I thought it was a good idea to pull everything together as a strand. So I guess a key learning for those of you, whether you're running a small team or a particular, business in itself, or again, those of you who are working cross organization, the question I'd like you to ask yourself is, which of these do we have in place, and which might you need to pay a bit more attention up to keep a balance across these things? So there are three pillars, and I'm going to start in that kind of top right, which is making sure your strategy and your culture are aligned. In session 3, we talked about, the alignment piece, and that, organization, you need to have strategic capability. You need to have people who can build and create and engage people in strategy. Smaller organizations, it just might be about making sure that everyone's really clear on what we're trying to achieve. And then matched with that is the how we be around here. Our culture has to be an enabler and a deliverer of the strategy. In a small team, it's how we operate with each other has to enable us to deliver what we need to deliver. And in many organizations, the alignment isn't there. Those two things are looked at separately. Next up, there's the development of leaders at all levels. And in session 2, we talked about building leadership capability. In particular, we talked about the top 4 characteristics that follow as one from leaders. And the other question that I would really pose to you now to go away and reflect on is, are the right people working on the business, and are the right people working in the business to the right degree? Because the challenge at the moment is lots of us are being forced to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty, and that's probably right. But leaders, we need to be asking ourselves the question, when's the right time to step away again and then re-empower our people, if that's even a word, and say, you can do this, I trust you, if you need me, I'm here. At the same time, we need to make sure our people are resilient enough and they're geared up enough, they've got that self-leadership. Remember the critical 4 for self-leadership that we talked about right near the beginning. So we need to make sure people feel resilient, that they've got the confidence, that they've got the self-efficacy, they've got that belief that they can learn, grow, develop. And those two things together mean that our people can get through this. And the third element, the third pillar, if you like, which is the most neglected one, wherever we do the diagnostic, we've got a beta form diagnostic, which checks where organizations are on this. And always the most neglected is this idea of building individual change capability. That's having facilitators in the business or within your team that can lead a meeting from a process point of view, or that can make change easy. They're a really scarce resource. And our view is that organizations should grow their own. They shouldn't employ facilitators to come in to lead their meetings for them. Build your own internal capability because it makes things easier. But partnered with that is building a business-wise change toolkit. So it's not just about saying, right, we're going to be a Six Sigma business, or we're going to be a Scrum business. It's the opposite of one size fits all. Not every change needs exactly the same tools. So if across our team or across the organization, we've got people who are experts in change tools, or we've got a resource of different change tools, whether that's something like a Shikawa or 5S or solutions focus or Scrum, we can call on those tools for different things at different times. So that's a way to pull together what we've been focusing on. If you want to spend some time making sure that your organization or your team or your business can perform through this, recover and recalibrate from it, and prepare for the next, make sure your strategy and culture are aligned. You've got the right leadership capability at all levels, and you've got the right change capability for you to be able to lead and manage the changes that come along. So I've probably got time for one final question, if it's out there, before I do a little bit of wrapping up and handing back to Tia. If there's one more question out there, then fire it in now. Flicking back through to see if there's any that I haven't answered. picked up Louise's talked about, asked a question earlier, why don't big bang launches work? Specifically around values, because so many of us have been in organisations where values have just been stuck on walls and on mouse mats and on screensavers, that people are naturally, in most organisations, really, negative's not the right word, maybe sceptical about whether values will ever take a hold. So if we do a big bang launch, what everyone's doing is immediately sitting and going, oh, well, so either this isn't going to work or we'll wait and see. Whereas if you've already started lighting fires around the organisation and making sure you have change champions in place or values champions in place and examples of where values are already living and breathing, so they start to come to life organically with a bit of guidance, then you do your launch later on, people go, oh, of course, these are the values because we've already seen them. If you haven't come across the law of diffusion of innovation, Louise, have a look at it because it starts to make sense of it a little bit more. So I've got a couple of requests and an offer, actually. So the request is, keep us in your address book. This has been like a real privilege and a pleasure. But 70% of our clients are in this kind of industry. 30% are doing brilliantly, but I'd love the opportunity to do more of this with you in the future. So the only way that happens is by keeping some connection. So next time when you've got budgets back to do leadership development or change or any of that stuff, just keep us in your address book and have us as one of the people who you would look at and talk to, because that's important. And equally important to that for me is keeping the conversation going. Every successful and important and powerful piece of work we've ever done started with a relationship first. So whether that's, if you haven't connected to social media already, do that. If you ever want to drop us a line, about any of the questions or things that I've raised on this, or just getting a different perspective, drop me an email and I'll email you back. That's just part of how we operate, because we know relationships, lead to the commercial stuff. And don't ever think that you can't. But do the social media stuff. That's really helpful, whether you want to connect on LinkedIn or Twitter or both or whatever. The offer that I've got is anybody who's been on all of these sessions, if you drop me an email, I'll send you a copy of the book. So no, I talked about as being the confidence book, but actually 80% of what we've done on this course is in there somewhere, actually. So if you've been on all of them, drop me an email, I'll get a copy to you. And the last thing, just before I hand back, I know we're really tight for time. I really genuinely believe this industry is going to have a huge bounce. And all we need to do emotionally and commercially till then is hold on tight, because it will be coming. And I wish you the best till then, and thank you for the time and the energy you put into these. Back to you, Tia.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for today. Thank you for taking us on this 6 weeks journey. I know that I speak on behalf of everybody by saying that we're really grateful for all your energy, insight, and ability to keep us engaged and well prepared to return to do what we love doing. I know that, having been in the industry for a long time, it is about delivering great customer service. It is about creating memorable experiences. It is about enjoying, being with guests. And I think that those who have joined on the on this journey will feel well equipped to deal with whatever comes next and all the challenges that are ahead of us. So a big thank you from everybody in the WHTL community. We have put this slide together. We've had 850 attendees in total, between those who have come live and those who have watched the recordings in their own time, and some amazing feedback. So we thought that we would share that with everybody on this webinar. I can see that there are lots of messages coming through, people who have not watched the recordings previously asking for the recordings, which we will share with with everybody. And lovely to see you all, and keep following us on LinkedIn and other social media. We will soon be launching a new series of webinars called The Inclusive Leader, focusing in particular on race and ethnicity, amongst lots of other things to support the WHTL community. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye.